Tonight, a 14-year-old is in custody, a community in Georgia devastated. What we are learning this evening about how law enforcement took down a school shooter.
Governor Kemp reached out to me and has provided me every single resource that he has to make sure justice prevails.
Also this evening, the vice president in, of all places, New Hampshire. Kamala Harris talking about possibly your business. What's she doing there? Plus, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is right here. We're talking with him live here on the Hill, how he's trying to get off the ballot after fighting to be on it. Also tonight, I'll explain the Pittsburgh Steel deal with some pretty big consequences, how this is actually bringing Trump and Harris together. Chris Steyerwalt here as well, breaking down the state of the race. Hello from Washington, I'm Blake Berman. You are watching the most politically unpredictable show in all of television. This is The Hill on NewsNation. And good evening. We talk about the 7 key states on this show all the time. After all, those are the ones that will likely decide the presidential election. One of them is Georgia. And tonight, a community there is dealing with the unimaginable. Just days into the school year at Appalachia High School in Winder, Georgia, that's between Athens and Atlanta, 2 students, 2 teachers are dead tonight after a 14-year-old opened fire. 9 others are in the hospital as well this evening. That teenager now in custody, but the motive is unknown. As authorities say, the 14-year-old will be charged as an adult with murder.
And our school resource officer engaged him, and the shooter quickly realized that if he did not give up, that it would end with an OIS, or an officer-involved shooting. He gave up, got on the ground, and the deputy took him into custody.
In New Hampshire today, the Vice President, Kamala Harris, opened her campaign remarks addressing what she called a quote-unquote senseless tragedy.
This is just a senseless tragedy on top of so many senseless tragedies, and it's just outrageous. And we have to end this epidemic of gun violence in our country once and for all.
Now, maybe you noticed something there as well. The Vice President of the United States, the Democratic nominee for president, would you look there? Behind bulletproof glass. Harris's first outdoor rally behind that bulletproof glass since the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. And like Trump, now as well, if she speaks to crowds outside, that bulletproof glass follows. Today, a Republican lawmaker on the task force looking into the Trump assassination attempt raised questions about what we know about that shooting, which also killed a firefighter simply attending a political rally. Congressman Clay Higgins putting out his own report. He says he was able to, for example, easily climb the roof that the shooter accessed. He questioned if the shooter died immediately and how the coroner later handled that shooter's body. Coming up here on the Hill, Congressman Glenn Ivey, who is on that committee, we expect to join us in a moment to ask him what he knows about that event and if anything, as far as he knows it, has changed. But with me here throughout the hour on the Hill, Ashley Davis, former official in the George W. Bush White House. Chris Steyerwalt, host of the Hill Sunday, NewsNation political editor as well. Julia Manchester, national political reporter for the Hill. And Joel Rubin is a Democratic strategist. Hello to you all. Nice to have you all in on this Wednesday. Obviously, the circumstances in Georgia, a lot of us are parents, heartbreaking, awful. We saw Kamala Harris, Chris, address it at the top of her remarks in New Hampshire today. She then went on forward and sort of laid out her plan, her vision as it relates to the economy and what she wants to do for smaller businesses. She was in New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. Why?
Well, New Hampshire was one of the closest states. If we broaden out just a little bit beyond those 7, New Hampshire would be the very next one on the list in terms of how close the race was in 2020. And it's September, so you can go in early September. Now, if Kamala Harris is still going to New Hampshire a month from now, this is a big, big problem. This would point to problems because this is a state that should be coming in her direction. But they also have a primary and a gubernatorial race, and so she's doing party diligence.
All right, so she said this today. Again, she rolled out small business, sort of her plan. We've been asking, what are the policies? What are the details? She said this today as it relates to part of her policy, which is capital gains taxes. Watch.
If you earn $1 million a year or more, the tax rate on your long-term capital gains will be 28% under my plan, because we know when the government encourages investment, it leads to broad-based economic growth.
All right, so what's going on here? Because the headline was she's moving away from President Biden as it relates to what he would do. But I guess the alternate Choose Your News, Chris, is she wants to raise capital gains taxes.
When I saw the headline come across today, you know what my first thought was?
What?
Berman means business.
And second,
I knew that.
But you think this is a symptom of sort of the bigger issue around Kamala Harris?
This is the key advantage that she has in many ways, which is she is seen as moving to the middle on a question because she wants to raise taxes less than Joe Biden does. So she seems to be migrating to the middle. Okay. But as you say, if you're somebody who right now is not paying 28% or 29% in capital gains taxes, if you're a small business owner, you'd say, that's a huge tax increase. Yeah. But she'd say, no, it's actually a decrease.
8%.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's not like insignificant.
But that's not on small businesses.
No, it's on $1 million or more.
Exactly. It's on investment income.
But it's just interesting to me that she's just throwing everything against the wall to see what will stick and, coming to the middle.
Is that what's going on here?
No, I think she actually has a really strong tax plan. Look, she's not interested in giving major giveaways to the extremely wealthy corporations and the billionaires in this country like Donald Trump's plan. What she's trying to do is encourage investment that is going to create jobs, entrepreneurship.
How does raising taxes encourage investment? When I heard her say, when the government, under my plan, because we know the government encourages investment, it leads to broad-based economic growth. I'm going, huh? Raising taxes?
Well, what this is combined with a $50,000 tax deduction for new businesses, for startups, for entrepreneurs. There's a plan in place to try to encourage entrepreneurship, building on the last 4 years where we've had about 20 million new businesses started at a record level. And that's the idea.
I'm going to get to that.
But they're different levels. I'm sorry. I just can't let you go on that one, Joel, and we just met. But you're raising taxes on a different income bracket than you're giving the tax credit to for the $50,000. The $50,000 is for small business.
Small business.
But you have to have revenue generation to offset.
I understand that, but how she's getting a revenue generation.
So look, this is the conversation that's finally being had. And we were like, where does she stand on the issues? Am I wrong? You don't think I'm wrong?
Well, it's the conversation that we're finally having, and it comes roughly a little less than a week before her and Donald Trump face off at the debate. Yeah. We know that Donald Trump, if he is able to stick to policy during the debate, I expect him to get at least some personal jabs in, but he has very much positioned himself, obviously, as the pro-business candidate, being a businessman himself. I'm curious to see, I haven't seen yet how he responds to this, but I imagine that he will hit her on this, going forward.
So how much of this is, let's just get stuff out there for the debate so that you can say, oh, well, this is what I would do. That's what I would do or not do, so on and so forth.
I think it's a little more broad than that. When she first released her economic plan, there was some criticism that it wasn't detailed enough. We are finally getting those details. So obviously there's the rolling out of those details. But look, the economy is a weak point for her. There was an ABC News Ipsos poll released last week that shows Trump leading her 9 points on the economy. And we know that 85% of voters, more than that, consider the economy to be a top issue. So she's got to start messaging on this. She can't run away from it.
How much of her being in New Hampshire today, Chris, was the Democratic Party basically told New Hampshire in the primary, you kind of don't matter, we're going elsewhere?
Yeah, they stiffed New Hampshire. Gelato, a discount liquor heir, Dean Phillips, went up to
anytime you get to drop that
one. Went up to New Hampshire, and the Democratic Party shut him out and basically denied him. And by the way, Kamala Harris would not be able to be doing what she's doing if she had to run in a competitive Democratic primary. She would not be able to be moving to the middle in the way that she is. Now, you people know that I hate the primary system. I hate the American primary system like God hates sin. It's a bad thing. Hopefully, Democrats are looking at Kamala Harris's ability to reposition herself for the general election and saying, oh, I don't know, maybe playing demolition derby in all of these early states for an audience of basically 500,000 voters is not a good idea because you have to stake out these extreme positions that are unpopular in the general.
I told you we had Congressman Glenn Ivey to react to all this. The congressman we're having a little difficulties linking up. Joe Kay I'm going to walk over to Joe Khalil real quick. Joe Khalil has some reporting today on what's happened with Clay Higgins. Let's swing it over here. Joe, there was a report today that came out from Clay Higgins, Republican congressman, as it relates to Donald Trump and this, of course, the assassination attempt.
Yep.
What did he put out, and why is he putting it out?
So he put out this
Hello, by the
report.
way.
How you doing? Good to see you. He put out this independent report, Blake. So this is separate from the committee investigating this. Some of his findings were interesting. He says the first bullet that actually hit the would-be assassin didn't come from Secret Service. It came from a local officer on the ground, a SWAT officer.
Okay.
He says the FBI cleaned up the scene relatively quickly in the first 24, 48 hours, which he says was unusual. He also says that the body itself of Thomas Crooks, of this would-be assassin, was given back to the family and cremated almost immediately, which raises some more questions. And actually one other committee member says...
It raises questions for him, though.
For him and for one or two others on the committee that I talked to. But, I think where you're leading here, this was, again, not the committee who's tasked with investigating this.
So what's going on here? Because there's this bipartisan committee, right, that's looking into all of this.
Yeah.
And then one member comes out and says, here's what I found.
Yeah. So
is that a crack in the system a little bit there?
I've done some reporting on this. So it was unusual. Some of the other members of the task force learned about Clay Higgins' report only when he put it out.
Through the media.
Okay. And some thought, look, this is inappropriate because we're a bipartisan committee, 7 Republicans, 6 Democrats. We got to work together. And if you put out your own report, it undermines the seriousness and the gravity of the one that we're all going to put together cohesively, some, as you mentioned, didn't find out about it till the media reported on it. Others said, we don't know where he got these facts from. They're not disputing his reports, but they're saying nobody was put under oath. That's usually how we get fact witnesses to talk to us and get material. So there are some concerns there, too.
Is this helpful, though? Because, at the end of the day, we want information on how all of this unfolded, right? And one of the questions is, can they come together in a bipartisan manner? And I think this brings up the idea of maybe this is Washington being Washington.
It's definitely a crack in it. And if you are with this committee at any point, I've already seen them in the field, I've talked to them privately, they take every opportunity to say, we are a bipartisan group, we're going to work together, we're working together well. Most of the members are not ones that really throw, shots at the other side too often. This is a crack in that sort of cohesion as they're trying to present it for.
All right, okay. With the reporting, Joe. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, still to come here on the Hill, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. now suing Wisconsin. He joins us live here on the Hill to discuss his fight to try to get his name off the ballot in some swing states. And U.S. Steel warning its Pittsburgh headquarters that thousands of union jobs there, well, they say that may be in jeopardy. We will tell you why. I'll explain it on the other side of the break. Chris Steyerwalt here as well to break down the state of the race. I'm Blake Berman. Welcome to Washington. 62 days to go until November 5th. We're back in a few. All right, welcome back here to the Hill on NewsNation. There is a big battle brewing in the swing state of Pennsylvania with both national and international consequences. The Washington Post reporting tonight that the Biden administration is preparing to block the sale of U.S. Steel, which is based in Pittsburgh, to the Japanese company Nippon Steel. Now, that is one area where presidential candidates on both sides of the aisle actually agree.
Stop Japan from buying United States steel. They shouldn't be allowed to buy it. We have to make it work.
U.S. Steel should remain American-owned and American-operated.
United States Steel, an iconic American company for more than a century, is going to remain an American company.
Now, the Wall Street Journal editorial board is taking shots at both sides. Here's its op-ed. It's titled Biden, Harris, Trump, Vance, and the dumbest economic idea. Now, the head of U.S. Steel unveiled, you could say, a threat of his own today. In an interview that appeared in the Wall Street Journal, the CEO, David Burritt, said if the deal doesn't go through, then facilities in Pennsylvania could shutter, with an emphasis of shifting those operations then down south to the state of Arkansas. He said of the Pittsburgh facility, quote, if that mill won't make it to the next decade, why would we stay there? All right, so over here at the wall now, let me walk you through sort of the job scenario and how all of this could essentially play out and where we are as a country today, really, and in the state of Pennsylvania. This is the JOLT survey, Job Openings and Labor Turnover Survey. This is for the whole country. Here's what we learned today. Job openings, that means if you're looking to find a job, it's getting harder to find a job. This is continuing to decline. So over here was during the Trump administration. You could see there was a pickup of job openings, COVID, right? And then a massive spike. And what's happened since in the recent couple of years, the number of job openings is just steadily coming down. It's harder to find a job right now. What about specifically job openings in the state of Pennsylvania, where U.S. Steel is located? This is the numbers there. So during the Trump administration, it kind of, was around that about 250, 300,000 level. Then what happened? COVID, right? Again, there was a spike in job openings. And since then, it kind of mirrors what's going on for the whole country in Pennsylvania. The number of job openings is coming down. It's getting, again, harder to find a job. Now, what about the Pennsylvania economy as a whole? Here's part of this story here. So this is some of the good, the really good, right? 3.4% unemployment rate. When you talk about that, that's basically at or near historic lows. Job creation at about 370,000. The interesting part about that is, at least that's during the Biden administration, is that's a 6% increase during the Biden administration. That's lower than the 11% average nationwide, though. And then specifically manufacturing, 29,000 jobs created during the Biden administration. Here's part of what I found so fascinating. Ashley and Joel, you're both from Pittsburgh. The CEO basically said, and I'm paraphrasing here, if you don't let this deal go through, I'm leaving this swing state and I'm going down south.
Yeah.
Which he should, because his responsibility is to the shareholders of this company. And this is on both sides, and we were just talking about this earlier, both Trump and Biden are absolutely wrong on this, and both of them are playing to the union.
You think Trump's wrong? You think Harris is wrong?
Yeah, I'm really concerned about this. Look, growing up in Pittsburgh, what we saw was mills leaving and going down south. This is like a repeat of history, and there needs to be something done to save the company, keep it there, keep it in Pittsburgh. That's what the priority should be. But preventing a sale may not do that, and in fact, to Ashley's point, we may see these jobs go away and eventually overseas.
They'll definitely go away.
My hometown lost its steel company, but my hometown of Wheeling, West Virginia, just down the Ohio River from Pittsburgh, lost its steel company a while ago. Here's the thing. What's the biggest employer in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania?
Well,
fracking.
The University of...
there's
UPMC.
Medical Center.
Pittsburgh is a different city profoundly and fundamentally than it was in the 1970s. Pittsburgh is a knowledge-based city. It's an education-based city. It's got lots of knowledge workers and all that stuff. These politicians who are not from Pittsburgh and don't know anything about the steel industry and don't know anything about coal and coke and iron ore and all of that jazz, they see this as a talisman. This is some totem that you hold up and say, well, as long as U.S. Steel is still in Pittsburgh. U.S. Steel, as we knew it, has been gone from Pittsburgh for a long time. And what they're trying to do is just take this for themselves.
But the jobs, though, are completely different than the jobs at UPMC. I mean, the jobs that U.S. Steel employs are from the surrounding counties. I mean, it's a...
You can go down the Mon and you can see there still works there, but it's a fraction. It's a pittance. The number of these jobs is much, much smaller.
Here's what I was thinking this morning. And I'm not picking on Pennsylvania or Arkansas. They just happen to be the states at play. One a swing state.
Look out, brother. Look out.
No. I mean, and one a swing state and one not. If it was the reverse and the jobs were going to a swing state, would the politicians say, yeah, let the deal go through. Let it happen?
I mean, it's a good question. I mean...
Am I wrong there?
I think this is an American icon. I watched this happen professionally with Walgreens when they were going to do a corporate inversion. And they were like, Walgreens is is the store next door. And so they didn't want an American icon to be inverted and be based in Europe.
U.S. Steel at one point.
And look at their stock now.
U.S. Steel at one point, the largest company in this country. I'll give you the last word here.
Right. No, look, I mean, I think you do bring up a good point here. Pennsylvania, I think Pennsylvania is the state you need to win in order to win the presidency. So in Western Pennsylvania in particular is going to be very much in play. So really no a surprise.
But who's going to get blamed is Biden for shutting these jobs down.
Biden needs to promise to rename Acrisure Stadium for Heinz Field. Again, bring back Heinz Field, you win Pittsburgh.
Let me, I said I would leave with you, but let me ask, why do you think Joe Biden's getting involved right now? Is it purely the elect? Like, he could have let this go if he ends up going forward with this.
Yeah, I think,
after the election.
I think, look, the reality is that we are in a crisis right now in the industrial part of our country, and in the Midwest, and the factory towns have been decimated. And so perhaps the president is trying to find a different way to keep the company there. The concern is that if Japan buys it, a Japanese company, Nippon, that it will be gone anyways, right?
Ally.
And that's an ally. And that is not, it's not clearly a national security threat that may be used, but there has to be a way to keep the company there. And the concern is if you sell it there to Nippon, it's probably going to be gone too.
All right, coming up next here on the Hill, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. out of the presidential race, his candidacy suspended, but he's still on the ballot in some of the most important swing states. And it could potentially have a really big impact on this election in November. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. live here on the Hill right after the break. And Chris Steyerwalt here as well, as you know, breaks down the latest polls. So where do the candidates, Donald Trump, Kamala Harris, stand? What is the impact right now with women and the impact it could have on the election? Chris, breaking it down. You're watching The Hill here on NewsNation.
Be relentlessly aggressive in countering and disrupting attempts by Russia and Iran, as well as China or any other foreign malign actor to interfere in our elections and undermine our democracy.
Welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. That, of course, the U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland. Earlier today, addressing the rising threat against U.S. elections and election workers. The Biden administration today accusing Russia of using its state media to spread disinformation to influence the upcoming presidential election. It comes as we are now 62 days away from November 5th, Election Day, while all eyes are on the Vice President, Kamala Harris, former President Donald Trump. The former independent presidential candidate, though, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., still could end up determining who might be the next president of the United States, as Kennedy's name will appear, as it stands right now, on some state ballots, even though his campaign is suspended. For example, he's off the ballots in 4 swing states, but is fighting to get his name removed from the ballots on Wisconsin, Michigan, and North Carolina. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., by the way, suing North Carolina's Education Board and Wisconsin's Election Commission to get off the ballots in those states. North Carolina, as you might know, the first ballots there are sent out just 2 days from now on Friday. Joining us now, once again, here on the Hill, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., former presidential candidate. Mr. Kennedy, thanks for being back with us. Appreciate it.
Blake, thanks for having me.
Of course, you got it. So when you suspended your campaign a couple weeks ago, you said that the numbers that you saw, your internal numbers, showed that if you stayed in the race in the swing states, you would help Kamala Harris and the Democrats. But as it stands right now, you can't get your name off the ballot in some of those states. And so I wonder if that's the reality, even though you're trying. At the end of the day, are you going to end up helping Kamala Harris?
Well, we're hoping that is not the result. I mean, the irony is that the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, was suing me across almost all of these states to try to keep me off the ballot, and they're now suing me to keep me on the ballot in those states. And there's been this very, very peculiar and unique and paradoxical inversion. But if we do appear on the ballot, I think there's some states that we want to get off, and we're not going to be able to get off. But we're going to send a very strong message out that people who are my supporters, we want them to vote for President Trump. That's
will you
the only
go there
way to
yourself?
Get me into Washington.
Yeah, will you go there yourself and tell? Yeah, will you go to those states and say, you know what? I know my name's on the ballot, but I support Donald Trump. Don't vote for him. Don't vote for me. Would you do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I already intend to do that. We're planning a Make America Healthy Again tour, where we're going to visit almost all of those states. So I will be doing rallies in each of those states over the next 61 days. We want to if we're going to accomplish the mission that I set out to accomplish when I got into this campaign, to end the censorship, to end the surveillance, to get out of the Ukraine war and unravel the war machine, to end the chronic disease epidemic, the only way to do that is to get President Trump in the White House and me into Washington. So we're going to pull out all the stops to make sure that happens.
Are you going to be alongside Donald Trump, essentially campaigning with him in those states?
I may be. I don't, we don't know. We haven't worked out the entire schedule, but certainly I'll probably do rallies with him and with other surrogates for President Trump. We're co-planning these rallies, the Make America Healthy Again rallies and the Drain the Swamp rallies with the Trump campaign, and we expect the Trump campaign to show up at the rallies too. So we're going to, I will be campaigning side by side with the president and with members of his family and with other members of his campaign.
What are the states in which you think you can help him, and what are the states in which, on the opposite, you think you might hurt him?
Most of the states, Blake, I actually take more. Our polling show that I take about 57 to 60% of my voters say, and this was pretty consistent throughout the campaign, said that if I left the campaign that they would vote for President Trump. There were a couple of states that were anomalous where, where my presence in the state actually helped President Trump. But for most of the states, my presence hurts President Trump. There's a couple of red states or a couple of blue states. What we did is we've tried to get out of all of the swing states. And then there are a couple of the red and blue states that we're also trying to get off of right now, to make sure that when President Trump gets in there, that he has both an electoral college victory and an election victory, so that makes it easier for him to govern.
You talk about trying to get off some of those states. Let's go back to that for a second, because here's what Mark Cuban said in the recent days. He said, quote, "You know who helped pay for the lawsuits that got RFK Jr. and Cornel West on the North Carolina ballot? Me. I help fund voter choice. I'm not a fan of the two-party system, and voter choice helps get candidates on ballots, and we're good at it. His North Carolina organization came to us for help. We helped. No cost to them, so I don't feel bad that he can't get off the ballot." That was Mark Cuban in the recent days. I spoke with the Republican Congressman Greg Murphy here on the Hill, Mr. Kennedy, just yesterday. I want you to listen to what he said. I'll get your reaction on the other side.
I think if RFK doesn't want to be on the ballot, he doesn't need to be on the ballot. So it's the North Carolina Board of Elections, which is a partisan board by Democratic Governor Roy Cooper, that is preventing RFK from getting off.
Do you think there's anything to what the congressman says there? And then conversely, what would you say to folks who say, you know what, Cuban's right. He wanted on the ballot. He got on the ballot. Tough luck. That's kind of what it is.
And are they saying the same thing about President Biden? Because he wanted on the ballot too, and when he said he wanted off the ballot, they took his name off all the ballots. So what I would say is what's good for the goose should be good for the gander as well. But, people are going to fight and make politics about this. I'm very surprised to hear that Mark Cuban was helping me. That is something that I didn't know about. And
you didn't know that? Yeah, that was his tweet that he posted, or his post on X.
Yeah, I had never heard anything like that. I had heard the opposite about Mark Cuban, and that, he had been opposed to me, but I could be wrong about that. But, I think people are going to play politics with this. It's not surprising that people are fighting for their own advantage, political advantage on this. I really, want to talk about the issues. I want to talk about getting out of the war that's bankrupting the American middle class in this country, bringing that money home, rebuilding our industrial base, keeping plants like U.S. Steel in Pittsburgh, building an industrial base so that we can have a good national security in this country. Today, we've exported our industrial base. The reason that we were able to win World War II is because we had industry in this country. We had steel and ball bearings and automobiles and ships. We could build a ship a day, 56,000 airplanes a month, et cetera.
So do you think Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are right?
About what?
About U.S. steel.
Well, I think, it's really not about a single plant. It's really about not exporting our industrial base to China and not spending all of our money on the military and on foreign wars. $200 billion that we're spending in Ukraine, let's bring that home and rebuild our industrial base and our middle class in this country.
Okay.
Americans are, the middle class is disappearing in this country. Over 50% of people in this country can't put their hands on $500 if they have an emergency. And we've never seen anything like this in the United States. We're turning into a third world country, and we need to start reinvesting here, and starting with reinvesting in our health and restoring the health, which is the biggest economic drain in our country.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr., always nice to speak with you, sir. Thank you for being back with us here on the Hill. I hope to talk to you again soon between now and Election Day. Thank you, sir. RFK Jr., national political reporter for The Hill. Julia Manchester, you take away what?
Look, it's such an irony because RFK Jr. has always been the wild card in this race, and now he's really feeling what it's like to be on the other side. The Democratic National Committee literally had, or still has, a group or a section of the committee devoted to attacking RFK Jr., putting opposition research out, etc. And now it's like he's the gift that almost keeps on giving for them. I mean, I think there's, a theory that Harris's rise could be in part due to a lot of liberal supporters coming home from RFK Jr. Now, I know a lot of public opinion.
But on the other hand,
inconclusive. But
yeah, on the other hand, there wasn't really a post-convention bounce, so you got to wonder if some of that support.
Well, I think pre-convention too.
Right. What'd you make as a Republican? What'd you make there of RFK Jr. basically saying he's going to be going out and campaigning for Donald Trump?
Maybe he shouldn't.
You don't want him to?
I think it's a tough message, but I do think that there is a lot of people that do support him because of the anti-vaccine, get out of my life type of voters that I think he's going to bring, that he does attract.
I mean, I just couldn't help but smile a bit there. He's trapped in a spider web of his own making, right? Like, he got himself on the ballot. There are deadlines in all of these states. You can't just leave when you want to leave. It's a false argument. Joe Biden was not on the ballot by deadlines. Therefore, what he's experiencing now is American democracy.
Steyerwalt breaks it down on the other side of the break, but real quick, what'd you hear there from RFK?
There are not a bunch of RFK Jr. voters. There are a bunch of protest voters who were protesting Joe Biden when he was the nominee. And when they got rid of Joe Biden, they said, okay, fine, I can come back. I don't have to park my vote over here. He had 5 points or so. 3 points went to Harris, where they were going to end up with a Democrat mostly anyway. And then that last little chunk, Trump wants them. And to the point that Ashley alluded to so graciously, is what you have to do with RFK. If you're a Republican, you don't want RFK on the campaign trail in North Carolina in October. You don't want him down there talking to voters down there, because to get that 1.5 that Trump thinks he can still get, you're alienating suburbanites. So it's a tough one.
All right. Steyerwalt breaks it down. Brand new polling today. State of the race. The other side of the break. You're watching The Hill here on NewsNation.
NewsNation Tuesday. Vice President Kamala Harris, former President Donald Trump, on the only network with respect for all Americans. Live coverage starts at 7/6 Central, followed by the ABC presidential debate simulcast. It's debate night with Chris Cuomo. Tuesday. Sit all down. Watch the only network with respect for all Americans. It's debate night with Chris Cuomo. Tuesday, 7/6
All All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. A new poll of 6 crucial swing states finds Vice President Harris leading in 2 of them. Donald Trump leading in 1, the other states tied. What does it mean, this potential mixed bag, I guess you could say, of results? 62 days away. Steyerwalt is here to break it all down. Chris?
All right, so these polls are from CNN, and they're all right. So if you look here at your first numbers, there you go. These are the poll compared to the results in these states in 2020. And you see that in Arizona, Trump is doing a lot better with voters there than he did in 2020. In Georgia, Harris is doing better than Biden did. In Michigan, she's doing better than Biden did. In Nevada, a little worse. In Pennsylvania, a little worse. And in Wisconsin, a lot better. What's your takeaway here? You put that together, even if you give Trump Pennsylvania and Kamala Harris as the next president of the United States, there's enough electoral votes in that for her to win. And I would also point out here, what you see in her performance in Georgia and in they don't have North Carolina. They should. Shame on them. Have North Carolina next time, please. What you see in Georgia is the promise of a coalition that includes motivated, mobilized black voters combined with affluent suburbanites who have continued to move in the Democrats' direction. Okay, but what about the ladies? Okay, 2020 results versus 2024 swing state poll among women. Harris is underperforming Biden in Arizona, tying his performance, these are in exit polls, in Georgia, about the same in Michigan, about the same in Nevada, a little better, a lot better in Pennsylvania, and a lot better in Wisconsin. This is how Kamala Harris hopes. She wants to see all of those numbers look like that, plus 17, plus 11, plus 16. She wants those numbers way, way up because she wants to have a coalition where they emphasize reproductive health and all of that other stuff. And it's true. And the gender gap is real. I'm not here to tell you the gender gap's not real, but it's not as real as the marriage gap. And I'm going to just keep reminding you of this. Here is, among just female voters in these same states, married women versus not married women. What do you see? Married women are Republican, except for in Nevada. This is why Nevada is the Lucy in the football for Republicans. Every 4 years they say, "Ooh, it's going to be Nevada this time," and Nevada's like, "Psych." But look at how well Democrats do with unmarried women, and look at how well Republicans do with married women. So it's just my way of saying, when they talk about the gender gap, we're not talking about a gender gap, we're talking about a marriage gap.
With married,
sit down.
Sorry, Blake.
No, go for it.
I just wonder if married women is children, because I would think that women with children, married or not, still care about the economy, they care about security, and they care about the border. So I just wonder I don't know.
The single biggest demographic, Republicans have fixated on the idea of that as the country becomes less white and heads towards being a minority country, that the Republicans have these electoral problems. That's not the biggest electoral problem facing the demographic problem facing Republicans. Biggest demographic problem facing Republicans is the delayed age of first marriage and having children. Yeah. So there's a tractor beam that pulls us through our lives. When we're young, we tend to be more progressive. We tend to live in places where we care about other issue sets. We get older, we get married, we have kids, we move out to the suburbs, and what do we start talking about? We start sounding like our parents.
Yes.
We start sounding like Republicans. We're talking about these taxes are too high, and we've got to get the crime under control, and all that stuff.
There are more unmarried women voters than married women voters. Is that correct? That's correct. So that is a significant data point as well on this.
I think the problem that Republicans are facing is there are a lot of J.D. Vance in particular, but the Republicans in general, found a way to hack off a bunch of women who would otherwise be sympathetic to them. if you have opinions about the purposes of postmenopausal women and what they're good for,
Oh my God.
if you have opinions about what women with cats should do, if you have opinions about what the gals out there ought to be doing, you're saying to the women in suburban Pittsburgh, suburban Philadelphia, and these other places, like, why do you have so many opinions about what I ought to be doing?
So I have a quick question. We hear a lot about
quick question, quick answer.
A lot about the Gen Z vote.
Yes.
Is it overrated, underrated?
Well, they don't vote, but those that do, no, I kid. About 20% of people in their 20s do vote, and the boys are a lot more Republican than the gals. But as a generation, they are much more progressive.
All right, before we had to break here, hello from our hill to yours to our viewers. We started the show talking about New Hampshire. The vice president is there. Hello to our viewers and listeners in Sugar Hill, New Hampshire. Sugar Hill. Would you look at that? Town located in Grafton County, little more than an hour north of Concord. Sugar Hill is represented in Congress by Congresswoman Custer. The race for New Hampshire's 1st district, by the way, will be one that we're watching on November 5th. As the Congresswoman announced in March, she would not be seeking re-election. My gosh, look at those.
Sugar Hill gang from there. A lot of people don't know that.
Really? In 2000, by the way, President Biden claimed 61% of Grafton County. Sugar Hill, also known for its lupine blooms, which it shows off at its annual festival in June. From our hill to yours, hello to our viewers in Sugar Hill, New Hampshire, and listening to us there on Sirius XM. Leland Vittert, host of On Balance, other side of the break, joins us. You're watching The Hill here on NewsNation. All right, so before we say goodbye, here's a story that caught our eye. California state Democrats refusing to pass a no tax on tips bill that was introduced by Republicans last week. That is in spite of the Democratic presidential party nominee, Kamala Harris, the vice president, who is from California, endorsing the idea of no taxes on tips. California Republicans called out the decision to kill the proposal without debate, saying, quote, the push to eliminate the federal tip tax has made its way to the campaign stage for both major parties this year. Yet California Democratic politicians don't believe it to be worthy to discuss at the state level. Leland Vittert, host of On Balance, the difference here.
You know what? You live long enough, you will see fiscal responsibility out of California.
So they have a $47 billion deficit there. They're trying to balance it. Here in Washington, everything's free, right? $35 trillion debt deficits. Don't worry about it.
We're silly season. People are being promised everything. We'll get to that a little later.